Okay, I'm going to start putting starter on this. This is a ZZ5 crate engine, but it does all small block Chevys would be the same. And I'm going to hopefully something I do will inspire you or help to figure out what the problem is. The starter mounting block has a side that's marked in and an end that's marked up. When that goes on there, the up is going to go up, and the in, which is this side, is going to go in towards the engine. Okay, I have the starter mounting block bolted on. It's not tightened down tight. The holes are sized so that you've got some adjustment. You know, how do you want to say, left to right as we're looking at it. You have some adjustment for this thing so you can move it around when you go to set up the gear drive so that it's just right. Right now, that's all the tighter I'm going to mount this. It's, pretty much up to the plate, but that's all the tighter I'm going to mount it until I get the starter drive gear in here. Then I'll adjust the starter drive gear and then tighten these two bolts permanently. Okay, from looking at your pictures, you've got this part of the assembly correct, but I'm going to go through it anyway. Here we have the starter blown apart for fitting the pinion and the starter mount to the adapter plate and make sure that the pinion's got the right engagement with the ring gear. The starter mounting block that comes on the starter has four different starter mounting positions. And this is going to be kind of hard to explain, but the position that you want to use is this one here. And in other words, when you mount your starter up to the engine, I only got two hands, so I'm going to use one of them to push the bolts in. When you mount it up to the engine, you want to have this single hole. It's a counterboard hole from the other side. You want to have it up and to your right. That way the starter will set in here with the solenoid virtually level. There's three other mounting positions which involve these three holes here and these three holes here. But when you're using this hole, you're going to be using when you're using this hole, you're going to be using this one and one of these three over here, wherever it lands. You'll see. Not hard to do. But anyway, and I see on your car you already have the bottom of this trimmed off, but if I have to use this video for somebody else, the adapter plate, the end down here of the adapter plate starter mounting only sets about 3/8 of an inch off of the frame rail. So this part of the starter, this bottom part, sticks down too far, so it has to be trimmed off. And what we're going to do with that is pull these bolts out, see if I can keep from dropping that on the floor in the meantime. Almost. Get the other hand in there to help. So this bottom edge of this thing gets trimmed off, and it's going to get cut right here between these two holes here, right in the middle there. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll get back to this. Okay, so now I have the block trimmed off, and you'll recall we still have this block, so we'll move around this way. And what we're doing now is, before we tighten up this block that bolts on, we're going to make sure it's square to the engine. This drive gear, when this drive comes out, to mesh with the ring gear properly, it needs to be on the same axis, or the same parallel line, if you will, with the crankshaft, at a right angle to the flywheel. So before I even go for an adjustment on the starter, I'm going to get these two 5.5 inch long bolts tightened up and make sure that this thing is parallel. You can do it on your final assembly. You're going to have to do it with a starter attached to this. But for now, we can take this piece off and take it over on a bench and bolt those, put those two 5.5-inch long bolts in and tighten them down. So I'm going to take these two bolts out right here and take the starter mounting block and this other starting the block that came with the starter, and we'll check and make sure they're parallel to each other. This line right here, the starter piece, the piece that came with the starter, is a little bit higher than this surface is, and I did that on purpose so that you got something you can depth mic or use a pair of calipers to check for parallelism. Okay, so right now I've got these two 5.5-inch long bolts in and tightened up tight. And I take my calipers and I check the depth from this surface to here and this surface to here, and I have 60 thousandths on both sides. So I check them on approximately out in here. And if you have a sensitive finger, you can actually run your finger down here and tell. If it's off 10 thousandths, you can tell if you're careful. And when we put this back on the engine, we're going to right now we're going to put it on the adapter and do the starter drive alignment. But then the 5.5-inch long bolts have to come out, and you have to mount the starter onto this block. You can't do it on the car or all assembled. I don't know. Anyway, the point is when you put it all back together, you want to have these two lines parallel to each other, the surfaces, and like I said, right now that step there is 60 thousandths at both ends. If you 60 thousandths don't really mean anything. The idea of it being the same at both ends, that's what counts. All right, let's stick this back on. Okay, so now we bolted it back on the adapter plate. We still have adjustment here. However, right now, no matter where I put this block, right now I feel confident that the axis of the center line of this pinion is the same as is parallel to the center line of the crankshaft. It's square to the flywheel. And when I come over here on this side, right now my gear drive is quite a ways away. But with the starter being able to adjust the movement here, you can get it up pretty close, and that's what we're going to work on now is to get it lined up right. All right, these two 2.5-inch long bolts here, I have them snugged up a bit, but I can still move the starter around. In fact, I have a 9/16 wrench on one of the nuts on the thing here, so that if I want to adjust this around a little bit, I can just come down here and tap on this or one way or another and move it where I'd like to get it. And the nice thing about working on cars is you can use office supplies. My wife brought home 1 billion paper clips when she retired, if you will, and I get to use one every once in a while. And the specification on the starter instructions is from the bottom of well, let's see if I can get the light closer. It's really hard to see, especially holding the camera. But anyway, from the bottom of the tooth to the base of the tooth on the ring gear is supposed to be 20 to 35 thousandths. I like 32 thousandths. That's what a paper clip is. And I use a 32 thousandths paper clip as a gauge. And then I just move this thing around to where I get it where I like it, and then I reach around the other side and snug up the bolts a little bit more and check it and snug up the bolts on these two to the point where you can't tighten them any tighter, and keep on checking that 32 thousandths. And once I get there, then I'm done. And once I'm done, that means this block that's bolted on here, this 4.5-inch long by 1.5-inch wide by 1 inch thick block, is going to stay there. Once I get that in place, I'm not moving that again. You know, the bolts that go in that hold this block to the starter mounting block are 5.5 inches long, and I put them in from the outside here because once you have it on the car or on the engine like it is now, if I put those bolts in going this way with the nut on this end, you can't get those bolts out. So if you ever have to service the car, you'll be glad you put the bolts in from this direction. Once you're all done with this, you know, this block is going to stay here. You don't want to be taking these two bolts out for any reason because you can't really do this alignment on the ring gear with the transmissions on the car. You know, if you ever have to service it in the car, you're going to want to make sure this block's already here where it's supposed to be, and hopefully your ring gear is going to line up, you know, if you ever have to replace the starter motor or something. Which I haven't had to do very often. I'd say maybe a couple times over the last 20 some odd years. And then when you push in on the pinion shaft back here, you want to have your teeth at the point where you're pointed straight toward each other. In other words, my pinion gear here needs to rotate just a little bit clockwise so that it's aligned properly. And the way you do that when you're sitting here is you have yourself a trusty old screwdriver, and you just come up here. If I can keep everything from moving around, just come up here and move your flywheel just a little bit. Okay? Okay, so I got it all mounted up. When you're pushing in this thing with your finger, you know, to line up with the flywheel, you'll notice that the gear, right, this gear right here is turning while you're pushing it in, which means when, of course, this gear is held by the pinion gear. This is the gear that spins your starter. Spins when the pinion gear on your starter motor engages it. And so when this drive goes in, the idea is that if you go to start your engine and your engine doesn't start, this gear may stick out like this. The reason being is when you get this spinning, when you push this in, that means that there's a rotation thing here, and what kicks your ring gear out, or what kicks your pinion back like this, is the engine actually starting, because it spins clockwise when you're looking at from the front of the engine, and it throws, once the engine fires, it throws this pinion back in to the position it's in now. Okay, that way the pinion goes back in, you know, it spins. When the motion of the crankshaft was turning, it flips that back in. Just so I tell you. Okay, so now we have it back together with the starter, and we've gone in with a pair of calipers, and we've checked the distance from this block to the block that the starter is mounted to at this end, and we went down here and checked it here, and we got the same thing we had when we had this all put together before. And if that's too hard to get to, you can always put your calipers in and measure from the face of the adapter to the face of this block, and from the face of the adapter to the face of the block up here, because all you want to do is make sure that thing's straight up and down. Now we can, some of these pinion gears are hollow, and some of them are solid across the face of them. But this one that's hollow. We can take a pair of needle nose pliers and pull this out. I'm trying to hold the camera while I'm doing this, so you can pull this out to engage the ring gear. You can let go of it and it'll stay there. Remember I told you sometimes they stay there? I'll show you how they come out of there in a minute. While we got it out here, I'll take my paper clip and stick it in there, and it feels like we got about 30. It feels just a little on the loose side for it's a 32 thousandths wire, just a little on the loose side, and that's about where I like them, to tell you the truth. And then we'll do a little demo of how the starter drive gear pops back in when the engine starts, because of course the engine hasn't started. Sometimes it'll go back in without starting. It'll go back in like it was when we started this little section of the video. But if we turn the engine clockwise, looking at the front of the engine, you see that thing with tracks. As soon as the crankshaft turns just a little bit, in other words, like fires, it'll throw the starter gear back. Of course, you release the key inside the car, but that's how starters work on everything. Is the crankshaft is what actually turns the drive so that the drive goes back in. All right, I think we're done. I hope you picked up something from this that might help you.